After 28 years on the bench, I have learned that justice does not get confused by money. People do. The morning Vivian Mercer laughed at my courtroom, I already knew one of us would leave changed, and I had a bad feeling it would not be the one everybody expected. Come with me all the way through this one. I am opening a drawer I do not open for many people, and I mean that. If you stay beside me from the first sound of her heels on courthouse tile to the last quiet word I spoke after the room emptied, you will understand why I still rise before dawn and treat every file like it carries a human life inside it. It was Wednesday, 18th March, and the sky over Belhaven, Ohio, looked like wet cement. I parked at 6:41 a.m. behind Belhaven Municipal Court at 114 West Clay Street, shut off my engine, and sat for 1 minute with my hands around a paper cup of black coffee. I drink it the same way every morning. No sugar, no cream. My father used to say sweet coffee makes a lawyer lazy and a judge sentimental. I never fully agreed with him, but I kept the habit anyway. Some habits outlive the people who gave them to us. When I stepped inside, the hallway held the smell of old files, radiator heat, and damp wool coats. The courthouse had not changed much in my 28 years on that bench. The floors still clicked in the same spots. The old clock near Courtroom 2 still ran fast by almost a minute. My clerk, Naomi Laird, sat behind her desk at 7:12 a.m. with a stack of blue folders lined up like soldiers. She looked over her glasses and said, "Morning, Judge. Full docket. One of them may test your patience." Naomi had worked with me for 11 years. She was not dramatic. If she warned me, I listened. The folder she handed over was stamped State of Ohio vs. Vivian Elise Mercer, Case 26 CRB 4417. 4 misdemeanor counts sat on the face sheet in plain black print, leaving the scene of an accident with injury, reckless operation, criminal damaging, unlawful use of a wireless device while driving. Then came the defendant notes. Female, age 27, daughter of Gavin Mercer, Chief Executive Officer, Mercer Biologics. Then the victim information, Elena Sofia Ramirez, female, age 46, Roosevelt Middle School science teacher, 22 years of service. Some files sit lightly in the hand. That one did not. It felt heavier than paper. Sergeant Harold Kemp, my bailiff, knocked once and stepped in with his usual quiet posture. He was a broad man with careful hands and the stillness that calms a room before trouble starts. "Galleries filling early," he said. "Ledger reporter 2 and Channel 9. That was strange. A municipal court bench trial built from a parking lot crash does not pull cameras unless something larger is hiding behind it. I looked back at the file and felt that old tightness I get when the law is about to meet money that thinks it is untouchable. On paper, the whole thing had started 5 weeks earlier on Friday, 13th February at 10:47 p.m. outside Sutton Pharmacy at the corner of East Marigold Avenue and South 9th Street. On paper, it looked small enough to miss. A dented old Honda, a bruised wrist, a driver who left. I have seen thousands of cases that looked small on paper. My father taught me before law school that harm likes to fold itself neat and tidy until somebody takes time to unfold it. That morning, before I had even tied my robe, I knew this was one of those cases. Before I tell you who walked into my courtroom that morning, let me ask you something quietly. Have you ever watched a person with money and comfort look right through someone decent as if that person were made of air? Not ignore them by accident. Look through them on purpose. That cold feeling you get in your chest when you see it matters in this story because it was the first thing half my courtroom felt before the first oath was ever given. Vivian Mercer arrived at 8:26 a.m., 6 minutes before I took the bench, and I heard her before I saw her. Her heels were not loud in the ordinary way. They were loud in the practiced way of someone who had spent her whole life expecting rooms to rearrange for her. When she stepped through the double doors of Courtroom 1, every head turned. Even the rain at the windows seemed to pause for a second and listen. She wore an ivory Tom Ford suit cut so sharply it looked like armor, a camel Hermes belt with a bright gold buckle, and black Balenciaga ankle boots with narrow, hard heels. A gold Rolex Datejust sat on her left wrist. In one hand, she carried a Louis Vuitton Neverfull bag the color of pale sand. In the other, she held a white iPhone 16 Pro with a silver V on the case and a tiny ring light clipped to the top edge. Her hair was blown smooth, not one strand out of place. She did not look frightened. She looked inconvenienced. Behind her came her attorney, Martin Keene, 61 years old, silver hair, navy Bryony suit, voice polished so smooth it almost sounded expensive on its own. Behind him came her father, Gavin Mercer, in a charcoal overcoat and dark leather gloves, with the still face of a man accustomed to buying space between himself and consequences. Vivian had a public life, too. Naomi had clipped a printout in the file showing she ran a large Instagram and TikTok account under the name Oh Vivian Unbothered, with just over 1.3 million followers combined, beauty routines, travel reels, rooftop dinners, short, cruel little jokes about ordinary people that passed online as wit. The first thing Vivian did when she entered my courtroom was not greet her lawyer or glance at the prosecution table or look at me. She looked straight at Elena Ramirez. Her eyes went slowly from Elena's thrift store navy cardigan to the worn black flats on her feet to the brace on her left wrist. Then Vivian smirked, not a nervous twitch, not strain, a real smirk. Elena lowered her eyes, not from weakness, but from discipline. There is a kind of dignity that refuses to perform pain for cruel people. Elena had that kind. Elena Ramirez sat near the aisle because the victim advocate chair gave her more room to keep her injured arms steady. She was 46, with dark hair pinned low, simple silver hoop earrings, and a faded green raincoat folded over the seat beside her. The snap at the collar was broken. Her left wrist was still stiff and swollen enough that the brace bulged under her sleeve. She held herself straight anyway. That matters to me. A lot of people mistake quiet for fragility. After 28 years, I know better. Elena had taught science at Roosevelt Middle School for 22 years. She ran the after-school robotics club, bought goggles and batteries with her own money when the district came up short, and spent Saturdays tutoring 2 boys from Maple Terrace apartments whose father had disappeared 3 winters earlier. She was raising her 17-year-old son, Mateo, while caring for her mother, Rosa Ramirez, 72, who had type 1 diabetes and a bad heart. Elena kept a folded notebook in her purse and wrote down every dollar. After an ice storm tore shingles off her roof in January, she had been $428 short on March rent. She had started weekend tutoring at $25 an hour just to keep Rosa's medicine paid and Mateo's community college fees within reach. If you have ever admired the kind of people who keep a family upright without speeches, without applause, and without asking the world for pity, then you and I are in the same company. Stay close to Elena Ramirez with me. The law saw her first as a victim. By the end of that day, my courtroom saw her for what she really was, which was stronger than that word. Her car was a 2009 Honda Civic with 187,214 miles on it, rust starting along the rear wheel well, heater weak on the passenger side, and a cracked speaker she never bothered to fix. She called it a blessing because it still started on cold mornings. She lived 3.5 miles from Roosevelt Middle School in a narrow duplex on Linden Street. Her son worked 3 nights a week bagging groceries at Grover's Market. Her mother took insulin at midnight and at breakfast. Elena's whole life was built on timing, small budgets, and doing what had to be done before anybody else had to ask. Vivian Mercer had entered her arraignment on Wednesday, 25 February 2026, with a not guilty plea and a laugh so soft it almost sounded polite until you felt the insult inside it. At the bond hearing, Martin Keene argued there was no danger, no flight risk, and no probable cause to believe his client knowingly left a scene involving injury. The state opposed him with witness statements and body camera footage. I set bond at $5,000 recognizance and ordered no contact with Elena Ramirez. Vivian rolled her eyes while I read the condition. Then she left as if she had just paid for valet parking. A plea agreement was offered on 9 March 2026, 30 days suspended, license restriction, full restitution, public apology on the record. Martin Keene rejected it and told the prosecutor his client would not plead to what he called a working-class misunderstanding inflated for optics. Elena heard those words in the hallway. She did not cry. She did not react. She simply adjusted the strap on her purse and asked the victim advocate what time she needed to return for trial. That kind of restraint always moves me more than noise does, because some people have carried hardship so long they no longer expect the room to bend around their grief. If you think money can outrun truth, I dare you to stay with me a little longer and see how that belief holds up. I have watched polished people step into old courtrooms wearing custom suits and expensive watches, sure they can charm facts into surrender. That morning, the facts were already seated and waiting. The original incident began after a very long Friday for Elena Ramirez. On 13th of February 2026, she taught a full school day, stayed until 5:40 p.m. to supervise robotics club, then crossed town to St. Luke's Parish Hall to help count fundraiser envelopes for Roosevelt Middle School's spring science trip. By 10:19 p.m., she was leaving with 2 poster tubes, a plastic tub of student trifold boards, and a handwritten list of supplies still needed for the lab. On her way home, she remembered Rosa's insulin refill was due that night. Sutton Pharmacy closed at 11:12 p.m. The next nearest late pharmacy was in Haviland, 23 miles away. The weather had turned ugly by then. Thin sleet, fine cold rain. Streetlights wore pale halos. Elena parked along the curb outside Sutton Pharmacy at 10:44 p.m. The fire lane by the door was already blocked by a black 2025 Porsche Cayenne Turbo Coupe with temporary vanity plates that read VMRCR1. The right rear tire sat on the red curb. The hazard lights blinked twice and then stopped. Elena noticed because she was the sort of woman who noticed the things that might trouble somebody else later. Inside the store, Brenda Klein, the night manager, was locking a cooler case when Elena came to the counter. Brenda knew her by name because Elena had been picking up Rosa's prescriptions there for 3 years. Elena paid for the insulin, the blood pressure tablets, and a generic antibiotic that cost more than she had expected. She used her debit card for part, then counted out $34.12 in small bills and coins from a zip pouch in her wallet for the rest. Brenda would later cry on the stand when she told us that detail because she said it was the first time she understood just how close to the edge Elena had been living. At 10:47 p.m., Elena stepped back into the rain and saw Vivian Mercer leaning against the Porsche, filming herself. The camera light was on, the phone sat high in her hand, her face was tilted toward it in that practiced half smile people wear when they have forgotten the difference between living and posting. Elena would later tell us she recognized Vivian from social media before she knew her name because some of her students followed an account called Vivian Unbothered, where designer halls and rooftop dinners were treated like public service announcements. Elena approached slowly because she did not like conflict. She still had the pharmacy bag in one hand and her keys in the other. She said in a tired, polite voice, "Miss, you can't leave the vehicle in the fire lane. An ambulance would need that space." Brenda Klein saw her say it through the front window. Theo Whitaker, a rideshare driver parked 22 feet away waiting for a pickup request, heard it through his half-open window. He would later repeat her tone exactly. Polite, tired, not 1 ounce of attitude. Vivian lowered the phone just enough to look Elena over. Then she said, "Then call the fire department, schoolmarm." Elena told her she only meant to help. Vivian said, "Help someone who shops where you shop." Then she glanced toward the Civic with its rust and tired paint and said, "That car should thank me for being nearby. It raises the whole block." Theo Whitaker heard every word. So did Brenda. Cruelty has a way of making its own witnesses. Before I move on, let me ask you for one quiet thing. Hold that image in your mind for a second. Not the Porsche, not the suit. A middle school teacher in sleet, half on her knees, trying to gather broken medicine off dirty pavement with one good hand while the person who caused it drives away laughing. The heart of this case was never the dented car. It was what that moment said about whose pain counted and whose did not. Theo Whitaker called 911 at 10:48 p.m. Brenda Klein ran out with paper towels and a first aid kit. A man from the laundromat carried over a folding stool. Elena kept apologizing for bleeding on the sidewalk. Officer Daniel Pike, badge 4172, arrived at 10:56 p.m. with Officer Monique Tran, badge 5521, 3 minutes behind him. Pike's body camera captured Elena saying, "I need to get home to my mother. Her insulin broke." Even now, when I hear those words in my mind, something in me goes still. Officer Pike noted swelling in Elena's left wrist, scrapes along her palm, and black paint transfer on the Civic consistent with a black Porsche Cayenne. Officer Tran photographed the broken insulin vial, the cracked injector pen, and fragments of a right rear taillight lens near the curb drain. She bagged each fragment separately at 11:18 p.m., sealed them, and signed across the tape. Chain of custody sounds dry when you first hear it in law school. It does not sound dry when the whole truth of a case may one day hang on a piece of red plastic no larger than a thumbnail. Elena refused an ambulance because Rosa was home alone. That choice would haunt her. Theo helped load the Civic onto a tow truck because the driver's side door would not open cleanly. Brenda wrapped a store ice pack in 2 produce bags for Elena's hip. Officer Pike drove her home after the statements were taken and the paperwork signed. They did not leave Sutton Pharmacy until after midnight. By then, Elena's clothes were cold, her wrist had swollen, and the insulin her mother needed was already gone. At 2:23 a.m. on Saturday, 14th of February 2026, Rosa Ramirez was in the emergency department at St. Agnes Hospital with blood glucose at 612 milligrams per deciliter and climbing. Mateo had found her confused and sweating in the kitchen chair. Elena met them there still wearing damp jeans and a borrowed wrap around her wrist. She did not tell the doctor she had been hit until a nurse saw the bruise rising along her hip. That part did not make the first police report. It surfaced later. When it did, the whole meaning of the case changed. If you stay with me now, the most important turn is close. You have heard how the harm began. You have heard who carried it, but you have not yet heard how the harm reached beyond one woman and one night. That part was still hidden when court opened. It did not stay hidden for long. When I took the bench at 8:32 a.m., the room rose. The gallery benches were full. A reporter from the Belhaven Ledger had a yellow legal pad across his knee. Naomi called the case. Prosecutor Dana Sue announced ready for the state. Martin Keene announced ready for the defense. Vivian Mercer stood when asked, but only barely. One hand stayed on her Louis Vuitton bag, as if even in court she expected someone else to carry whatever grew heavy. From the first minutes, Vivian changed the temperature of the room. During the reading of instructions, she whispered to Martin Keene twice, loud enough for the first row to hear. The first time she said, "This is so provincial." The second time she said, "I missed Palm Beach for this." Sergeant Kemp shifted his weight by the rail, not threatening, just present. Good bailiffs do not need to make a show. They simply remind a room that its boundaries still exist. The state called Officer Daniel Pike first. He was 34, narrow scar at the chin, voice steady in the careful way of an officer who writes reports as if strangers may one day need to trust them. Under sworn testimony, he described the scene, the victim's condition, the broken medication, and the witness statements taken that night. Martin Keene objected to one part of the body camera footage as hearsay. I sustained part of the objection and overruled part. Procedure matters most when the facts are ugly. That is when the law proves whether it is honest. The body camera footage was not dramatic in the movie sense. It was worse. It was plain. Rain cutting through cruiser lights. Elena Ramirez on a folding stool, green coat dark with water, face pale but controlled. Brenda Klein saying, "She never yelled at that girl once." Theo Whitaker giving the plate number from memory. Then Elena's own voice, thin and embarrassed, saying, "I'm sorry, officer, the insulin broke." The whole courtroom inhaled together at that line. Even the old heater under the wall seemed to stop. Vivian looked bored during most of the footage. When the screen showed the medication on the pavement, she looked annoyed. Officer Monique Tran came next. She was small, exact, and not easily rattled. I had seen seasoned defense lawyers underestimate her before and regret it later. She testified about the taillight fragments, paint transfer, and the follow-up investigation that located Vivian's Porsche in the private Mercer Tower garage at 11:31 p.m. on 13th of February 2026. The right rear taillight had been replaced by 7:10 a.m. the next morning. The repair invoice, marked as State's Exhibit 12, showed rush service requested by Mercer Executive Security. That was the first time I saw the defense table tighten. Tran had more. Surveillance from Mercer Tower's loading dock showed a security employee removing a damaged taillight assembly from the black Porsche at 11:37 p.m. At 11:46 p.m., a new one was installed. The old assembly was boxed and sent to an off-site storage room. Tran recovered it 3 days later under warrant. The fracture lines matched the red lens pieces found at Sutton Pharmacy. Chain of custody was complete from curb to courtroom. When Martin Keene moved to dismiss for lack of proof on identity, suggesting family driver Nicholas Salazar might have been using the Porsche, Tran answered before Dana Sue even needed to guide her there. Salazar's badge logs, hotel receipt, and flight record placed him in Cleveland. 141 miles away, checked into the airport Marriott at 9:58 p.m. that night. I denied the motion to dismiss on the spot. Vivian gave a short, hard laugh. "So what?" she muttered. "You found a tail light." Martin touched her sleeve. I looked over my glasses and said, "Ms. Mercer, you will not speak out of turn in my courtroom again." She leaned back, folded her arms, and stared at me with the disbelief of someone who had never once been told no by a woman she could not fire. I have seen that expression before. It never improves with age. Brenda Klein took the stand in her pharmacy smock under a cardigan because she had come straight from a shortened shift. Her hands shook when she raised them for the oath. Some witnesses shake because they are unsure. Brenda shook because she understood what words become once they enter a transcript. She told us how Elena counted coins for medicine, how politely she spoke to Vivian, and how Vivian answered. When Dana Sue asked what stayed with her most from that night, Brenda looked straight at the defense table and said, "That poor woman was on the ground," and Ms. Mercer looked offended by the inconvenience of seeing her there. Truth does not enter a courtroom all at once. It comes in layers. First the facts, then the tone, then the thing beneath the tone that tells you what kind of person made those facts happen. By mid-morning, we had the first two layers. Vivian Mercer still did not seem to understand the third was on its way. Theo Whitaker came in wearing a delivery jacket over a clean white shirt. He had shaved for court and kept twisting his rideshare lanyard in his fingers. He was 39, a former warehouse worker laid off when the paper plant closed, now driving nights to keep child support current. He had no history with Elena and no reason to lie for her. That matters more than people realize. Neutral witnesses carry a certain kind of weight. They do not arrive already full of story. They arrive full of sight. Theo testified that he had been parked 22 feet from the Porsche, facing north, waiting for a pickup set for 10:50 p.m. He saw Elena come out of Sutton Pharmacy with a white bag and keys in her hand. He heard her say, "Miss, this is a fire lane." He heard Vivian answer, then call the fire department schoolmarm. He saw Vivian back out fast with the phone raised in her left hand, strike the Honda, and hit Elena. Martin Keene tried to suggest that rain and glare affected Theo's view. Theo answered, "Rain doesn't turn a phone into a steering wheel." A little sound moved through the gallery. Not laughter exactly, recognition. If you believe ordinary people are the backbone of truth in a courtroom, then you belong to a very good kind of crowd. I have spent a career leaning on janitors, clerks, drivers, nurses, shop workers, and teachers who showed up, raised a hand, and told the truth without polish. Courts stand on that kind of courage more than they stand on marble. The state introduced photographs of the Civic next. Driver's side door caved in, scrape marks along the quarter panel, bent mirror housing. In another image, the pharmacy bag sat split open in rainwater with insulin packaging half drowned and bits of glass glittering at the curb. Naomi marked each exhibit with her usual clean exactness. I watched Elena through that part. She sat very still, chin up, as if she had decided long before she entered my courtroom that she would not let those photographs turn her into a public wound. Then came the medical records. St. Agnes Urgent Care at 3:11 a.m. on 14th February 2026. Left wrist sprain, severe hip contusion, soft tissue damage, brace issued, 7 to 10 days of restricted movement. Donna Shu asked how much work Elena missed. 12 full school days, 3 half days for follow-up care. Martin Keene objected to lost wage calculations. I overruled him, relevant to restitution. Vivian sighed loudly enough that even her father shut his eyes for a second. Dana did not stop there. She introduced a worksheet for documented losses already supported by bills. Elena's urgent care, imaging, and physical therapy totaled $2,964.28. The replacement insulin and additional medication after the broken vial came to $186.14. Bus fares, rides, and school travel while the Civic was gone totaled $127.50. Towing, storage, and deductible charges came to $722.08. Replacement value of the Civic, adjusted for mileage and condition, was $4,180. Lost tutoring wages were $1,126.40. Rosa's hospital copays and medication changes were $3,942.16. The running total sat at $13,948.56. Numbers can tell stories just as clearly as tears can. Before lunch, the defense made the choice I suspected they would regret. Martin Keene called Vivian Mercer. Some lawyers never should put a client on the stand, but pride is its own reckless engine. Vivian walked to the witness chair with that same polished ease, smoothed the front of her Tom Ford jacket, touched her Rolex as if checking the time, and swore to tell the truth in a voice so smooth it could have sold perfume. She crossed her legs, angled her chin, and looked at Dana Shu as if the whole process bored her. Vivian testified that she had indeed been at Sutton Pharmacy, but had only stopped for a moment. She denied insulting Elena. She denied striking Elena with the Porsche and claimed she felt a minor bump that might have been the curb. She said she left because it was raining and she feared being surrounded by hostile people. When Dana asked why the taillight had been replaced before sunrise, Vivian shrugged and said her security team handled vehicle maintenance and she didn't track the trivialities. That word landed in the courtroom like a spoon dropped in church. Dana asked whether Ms. Ramirez's car was a triviality. Vivian shrugged again. The whole event was being exaggerated. Dana asked whether a broken insulin vial was a triviality. Vivian paused too long. I wasn't inspecting groceries, she said. Sergeant Kemp shifted his gaze. The Ledger reporter stopped writing for half a second. I had seen arrogance before. What unsettled me was how comfortable hers felt, like she had worn it daily for so many years she no longer felt it on her own skin. Dana then produced a screenshot of Vivian's public Instagram account of Vivian Unbothered, captured before the account went private. The image showed Vivian standing in the Sutton Pharmacy lot at 10:46 p.m. on 13th of February 2026, chin lifted, rain on her lashes, the black Porsche behind her, and a caption in white letters reading, "Fire lane because rules are for people with nowhere to be." Martin Keene was on his feet before Dana finished reading it. Foundation, authenticity, prejudice. He asked for a continuance right there, claiming the defense had not been given enough time to inspect the full digital extraction. Dana answered that she was using the screenshot first to identify the account Vivian herself had just admitted was hers. I allowed that limited use and called a lunch recess at 12:03 p.m. so counsel could review what the state said was still coming from a pending warrant return. As the room rose, Vivian did not turn to her lawyer first. She turned to Elena. "This is why poor people love court," she said, just loud enough to travel. "Free attention." Elena did not answer. She only adjusted the brace on her wrist and stood slowly, the way people stand when pain has become a daily negotiation. I told Ms. Mercer that one more personal remark toward the victim would bring sanctions. She smiled as if I had praised her nerve. Look at your own life for 1 second through Elena's eyes. Imagine carrying a sick mother, a son on the edge of adulthood, a tired car, a thin budget, and 22 years of service on your back, only to have a stranger decide your pain is a punchline. That is where this case stopped being about property and started being about moral weight. I spent lunch in chambers with untouched soup cooling beside my legal pad. Rain tapped the narrow window. My father used to say contempt in a courtroom is usually fear dressed in better clothing. I thought of that while I reviewed notes. Vivian Mercer did not look afraid yet, but she had begun to lose the easy rhythm of someone certain she cannot be reached. That matters. Truth usually arrives before remorse does. It often arrives much earlier. We resumed at 1:07 p.m. The state called Elena Ramirez. She walked to the stand with that same careful posture, green raincoat folded over the back of the chair, navy blouse neat at the collar, dark hair pinned low. Up close, I could see the tiredness around her mouth and eyes. Not courtroom tiredness, life tiredness, the kind that settles into people who have been dependable for too many years in a row. Under sworn testimony, Elena told her story exactly as she had lived it. No decoration, no speeches. She described leaving the school fundraiser, stopping for Rosa's insulin, seeing the Porsche in the fire lane, and speaking because she would have said the same thing to anyone. "I wasn't trying to shame her," she said softly. "I was trying to keep a path clear in case somebody needed help." Dana asked how close Vivian had been. Elena held up her right hand, maybe 4 feet, close enough for me to smell her perfume. When asked what Vivian had said, Elena repeated it without drama. She said, "Help someone who shops where you shop." Then she looked at my car and said it raised the block by being near it. A low sound moved through the room before people remembered themselves. Vivian examined her own nails. Once, she yawned behind 2 fingers. Dana then asked what happened after the impact. Elena paused only once. I landed on my left side, my wrist folded under me. I heard the insulin break before I felt the worst of the pain. Dana asked whether Elena accepted an ambulance. Elena shook her head. No, ma'am. My mother was alone. My son was working a late shift at Grover's Market. I thought if I got home fast enough, I could still help her. Dana asked what Rosa's condition was. Type 1 diabetes for 40 years, Elena said. Heart trouble for 6. She depends on me for almost everything after dark. That was the moment Vivian finally looked up. Dana asked what happened after Elena got home. Elena swallowed once. Officer Pike drove me. We called the on-call line for another fill, but the insurance would not cover a second emergency replacement without doctor approval. The pharmacy that had stock was in Haviland. My car had been towed. Mateo got home around 1:50 a.m. By then, my mother was confused. At 2:23 a.m., he called 911. Her voice never cracked. That almost made it harder to hear. Dana introduced the hospital billing summaries next. Rosa had been admitted for 36 hours after the diabetic crisis. Insurance still left Elena responsible for $3,942.16 in out-of-pocket costs. Elena missed 12 full school days and 3 half days, losing $1,126.40 in tutoring money she needed for rent. The Civic was declared a total loss at $4,980. She borrowed a neighbor's car for 2 weeks, then rode 2 buses to school while her hip was still dark with bruising. Dana asked the last question before cross. Did the defendant ever contact you to ask if you were hurt? Elena looked at me, then at the prosecution table and said, No, Your Honor, but someone from Mercer Executive Security left a voicemail on 17th of February at 8:14 p.m. offering $8,000 if I signed a release and agreed not to mention her online or to the school board. If this story has stirred anger in you, do not keep it vague. Tell me in your own heart which moment cut deepest. Was it the laughter, the offer to buy silence, or the way Elena still chose careful words while carrying more than one person should? I always wanted to know not just what a courtroom heard, but what it could not stop feeling. Cross-examination did not rescue the defense. Martin Keene suggested Elena's injuries had been made worse by her own refusal of the ambulance. Elena answered, I made the best choice I could for my mother with the help I had. He suggested perhaps she stepped backward unexpectedly. I was opening my own car door, she said. He suggested fatigue could have affected her memory. Not enough to confuse a Porsche with a prayer, she answered. I had to look down for a second after that, not because I found humor in it, but because some truths arrive so cleanly they do not need a judge's face added to them. Then Martin made the mistake lawyers make when they begin losing control of the field beneath their feet. He asked whether Elena had perhaps become emotionally invested in painting wealth as cruelty. Before Dana could object, Elena answered with a calm that made the question collapse. No, sir. I became invested in paying for my mother's medicine and getting to work. Martin sat down after that. There was nowhere honest left to go. Before Elena stepped down, Vivian leaned toward her attorney and whispered something that made him close his eyes for a full second. Then, during a pause while exhibits were marked, she said aloud, if her mother was that fragile, she should have used delivery. She did not shout. She did not need to. The whole courtroom changed on that sentence. A woman in the back row pressed a hand to her mouth. Sergeant Kemp straightened. Naomi looked over her glasses at me. I told Vivian Mercer in the flattest voice I own, you will not speak again unless counsel instructs you to answer a lawful question. One more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt of court. For the first time all day, she looked startled. At 1:36 p.m., just as Dana Sue was moving to call the next witness, the side door opened and Sergeant Kemp stepped forward to speak quietly with another officer near the clerk's rail. A minute later, he handed Dana a sealed envelope and a thumb drive. She approached and told me the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation had completed an emergency digital preservation response under warrant. She asked for a short recess to review. Martin renewed his motion for a continuance. I gave both sides 12 minutes and no more. Court does not turn on speeches. It turns on records, timestamps, and what careless people leave behind when they think deletion is the same thing as disappearance. At 1:52 p.m., the state called Lieutenant Adrian Cole of the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation Digital Evidence Unit. He was 48, lean as a fence post, close gray hair, voice so steady it sounded as if it had never once hurried in its life. He explained digital hash values, account ownership, and basic chain of custody in plain terms every person in the room could follow. I appreciated that. A courtroom does not need a witness to sound clever. It needs a witness to sound true. Lieutenant Cole identified State's Exhibit 27, a certified extraction report. The account owner email matched Vivian Mercer, mercerholdings.com. The registered mobile number ended in 4417. The device used to upload the relevant content was an iPhone 16 Pro registered to Vivian Elise Mercer. At 10:46:12 p.m. on 13th of February 2026, that device posted an Instagram story from a geolocation within 9 meters of Sutton Pharmacy. The clip showed Vivian turning the camera from her own face to the black Porsche while laughing. The caption was exactly what Officer Tran had earlier captured: fire lane because rules are for people with nowhere to be. Then came the second clip, posted at 10:47:58 p.m. The courtroom lights were dimmed and the projector washed every face pale blue. In the video, the camera was front-facing from the driver's seat. Vivian's cheek, the sparkle of her earring, rain moving across the windshield, and the red curb behind her were all visible. Elena's voice sounded from outside, muffled but clear. "Miss, you can't leave that there. Someone may need the lane." Vivian answered in a bright, careless tone, "Then they can wait 60 seconds like everyone else." 3 seconds later, the picture jolted. There was a heavy bump, a sharp cry. Vivian laughed once and said, "Oh my God, she actually touched my car." Then the video ended. Be still with me here, really still. What came off that screen was not just evidence. It was character caught without a mask. The room felt like winter air through a church door, cold, sudden, personal. Nobody coughed, nobody shifted. Even Gavin Mercer stopped writing notes. If you have ever wanted to know what a lie sounds like when its own recording starts playing back in public, it sounds like silence after laughter. Lieutenant Cole was not finished. At 10:52:09 p.m., 5 minutes after the impact, Vivian posted to a private close friend's Instagram story visible to 117 selected followers. The recovered still frame showed the Porsche moving along South 9th Street, dashboard glowing amber, wipers sweeping. Vivian's voice said, "Some public school, nobody threw herself near my bumper for sympathy. I am not catching charges over a scratched beater." Across the bottom sat a text sticker that read, "People are so desperate in this town." That story was deleted at 11:03 p.m. The platform server recorded the deletion. Recovery was complete. Martin Keene objected again and again. Relevance, prejudice, foundation, character. Each time Dana answered cleanly. Each time I ruled. The posts went directly to identity, operation of the vehicle, state of mind, knowledge of injury, and consciousness of guilt. Law can become very simple when facts stop being shy. Vivian Mercer, who had spent the morning pretending confusion, was now on video mocking the exact woman she claimed she had never insulted. Dana then moved to the messages recovered from the same device between 11:04 p.m. and 11:28 p.m. Martin objected on privacy and attorney-client grounds. Dana answered that the texts were between Vivian and Trent Harlan, director of Mercer Executive Security, not counsel. I admitted them. Lieutenant Cole read the first message. At 11:04 p.m., Vivian texted, "Swap rear light before morning. Some teacher is making noise." At 11:06 p.m., Harlan answered, "Understood. Any police ID?" At 11:07 p.m., Vivian replied, "Pharmacy lot on Marigold. Bruised ego more than anything. Just fix it." Then came the message that pushed the room from outrage into something heavier. At 11:12 p.m., Vivian texted a contact saved as Dad. "Minor mess at Sutton, security handling some woman making drama." At 11:13 p.m., Gavin Mercer answered, "Keep quiet. I'll handle the school if needed." Dana did not look at the gallery when that line was read. She looked at me. She knew as well as I did that the phrase "handle the school" did not belong to a simple hit and run anymore. Before I could call the next witness, Vivian rose. She did not ask permission. Her face had gone from glossy confidence to something harder and thinner. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "This whole town survives on people like my father. You sit up there in this little court acting like justice is some holy thing, but all you do is punish success and protect failure." Every word struck wood, glass, and skin. Nobody moved until she finished. I told her to sit down. She did not. "You want to make an example out of me because she teaches 8th grade science and shops with coupons? This court is a joke." Sergeant Kemp stepped one pace forward. I let silence sit 3 full seconds. Then I said, "Ms. Mercer, you are 1 sentence away from contempt of court. Sit." This time she sat. If you have ever wondered whether real justice is still possible in a world where money buys speed, privacy, and polished excuses, hold that question close for a little longer. I asked myself the same thing in that moment, and what came next is the answer I still live with. Dana Shue called Dr. Lorraine Phelps, superintendent of Belhaven City Schools. She had arrived during Lieutenant Cole's testimony under subpoena and now sat in the witness chair in a gray wool suit still dotted with rain. School superintendents rarely have the luxury of drama. She did not waste a word. Under oath, she testified that on Monday, 16th February 2026 at 8:41 a.m., she received a call from Gavin Mercer. Mercer Biologics Foundation had pledged $250,000 toward Roosevelt Middle School's new STEM lab, though final papers had not yet been signed. According to Dr. Phelps, Gavin Mercer told her there had been an unfortunate misunderstanding involving one of your staff and suggested the district encourage Ms. Ramirez not to inflame it. At 9:06 a.m. that same morning, Dr. Phelps received a follow-up email from Claire Donnelly, executive assistant to Gavin Mercer, stating that further public escalation might complicate philanthropy discussions. Dana asked why Dr. Phelps had come in person instead of sending records. Dr. Phelps looked at Elena with a sorrow that told me she hated every inch of what she was about to say. "Because yesterday afternoon," she said, "Ms. Ramirez asked to step back from being considered for our district nomination to Ohio Teacher of the Year. She told me she did not want attention from this case to cost our students the lab. I believe the court should know the pressure being applied was not only to a private citizen, it was to a public school and its children." That was the hidden, deeper truth. Suddenly, the case was not only about a woman in the rain, it was about money leaning on a school through the back door. Elena had never told the court that part. She sat motionless while Dr. Phelps spoke, eyes lowered, jaw set, as if she hated being the center of any room, even now. The gallery shifted not with chatter, but with the unease people feel when they realize how close their own children can come to being used as leverage. Martin Keene tried to limit the damage on cross. He asked whether Gavin Mercer had directly threatened the district. "No direct threat," Dr. Phelps answered, "only an implied cost attached to fairness." He asked whether the grant had officially been withdrawn. She said no, but negotiations had been frozen. He asked whether Elena's Teacher of the Year nomination had formally been removed. Dr. Phelps replied, "No, because I refused to let it be." That ended the cross in everything but words. Dana recalled Elena for one final point. Elena returned to the stand even more reluctantly than before. Dana asked whether she had tried to withdraw from the nomination. Elena said yes. Dana asked why. Elena looked down at her hands. "Because we needed that lab. My students need real equipment. If stepping back kept adults from using children as leverage, then I was willing." Dana asked whether anyone ordered her to do that. "No," Elena said. "I just know how people like that work." The room heard her. Vivian's face had gone pale under her makeup by then, but pride still held the wheel. She leaned toward Martin Keene, then said, "Oh, please, she's acting like a saint now." I stopped her with one look. Sometimes a judge does not need volume. Sometimes she only needs the full weight of a room that has stopped pretending. Vivian glanced at me and then at last looked away. "If you know a teacher, send this story to that teacher when you are done. Send it to the woman who buys pencils with her own money, or the man who stays after school with children nobody else has time for, or the one who keeps showing up while the world keeps acting as if that labor is ordinary. People like Elena Ramirez deserve to be seen in full." The state rested at 3:24 p.m. The defense renewed its motion to dismiss on selective grounds and asked again for a continuance to address the recovered digital material. I denied both. The digital evidence was authentic, directly responsive to issues the defense had itself raised and already reviewed by counsel. More importantly, delay would not change the timestamps, the words, the videos, or the laugh after impact. Truth grows very difficult to continue once it has already entered the room. Martin Keene called no further witnesses. He advised that his client would not testify again. Smart choice. Too late, but smart. In closing, he argued youth, pressure, overreaction, and the danger of letting class resentment infect a municipal court sentence. Dana Shu answered with the kind of clean force I admire in young prosecutors. "This is not a trial about wealth," she said. "It is a trial about choice. Ms. Mercer chose contempt over care, flight over responsibility, deletion over honesty, and pressure over apology. Ms. Ramirez chose work, family, dignity, and restraint. The law must know the difference." Then she sat. The room stayed still. And then there came one final fact, entered almost gently into the record, that left the whole courtroom without language for several long seconds. Dana moved to admit a stipulation from St. Agnes Hospital, reviewed and agreed to by both parties. Rosa Ramirez's diabetic crisis had caused an acute kidney injury. She recovered, but not fully. Her doctor expected reduced kidney function for the rest of her life. The shattered insulin on the pavement had not only cost money, it had changed another woman's body. No one spoke. Not the lawyers, not the reporters, not the gallery. Even the heater under the wall sounded loud when it kicked on. Vivian stared at the table as if the grain in the wood might rearrange itself into mercy. Elena did not move at all. The silence in that courtroom became a witness of its own. It stood there longer than any person did, and for that long moment, it said more than the rest of us could. I asked for a 15-minute recess at 3:51 p.m. and went into chambers with the file, my notes, and the old photograph I keep tucked in my desk drawer of my father outside the county courthouse in his worn brown coat. He taught me the law before I ever stepped into a classroom. He used to say, "A robe means nothing if you forget the person standing in shoes you cannot afford." I sat with that sentence. I sat with the sound of Vivian's laugh. I sat with the image of broken insulin on black pavement. Judges who rush rulings are often serving themselves, not the law. I was not going to do that. I will admit something to you here because this is the truth, and I promised you the truth. There are still moments, even after 28 years, when I feel the full weight of speaking words that will alter somebody's life at 4 o'clock on an ordinary Wednesday. If you have ever carried responsibility heavy enough to make your hands feel older than the rest of you, then you know exactly what I felt in chambers that afternoon. When I came back onto the bench at 4:09 p.m., nobody needed to be told to rise quickly. They did. Even the air felt disciplined. Naomi handed me the verdict forms, though in a bench trial the findings were mine alone. I looked first at Vivian Mercer, then at Elena Ramirez, then at Gavin Mercer, then at the full gallery, because justice is spoken to a room even when only one name appears in the caption. I found Vivian Elise Mercer guilty on all 4 counts. Guilty of leaving the scene of an accident with injury, guilty of reckless operation, guilty of criminal damaging, guilty of unlawful use of a wireless device while driving. I stated each count separately and the reasons separately. The defendant's own recorded statements proved identity, awareness of the victim, and a conscious decision to flee. The rushed taillight replacement and the digital messages showed consciousness of guilt. Witness testimony was credible, consistent, and reinforced by physical evidence. The court found no basis for doubt built on anything but status and wishful thinking. Then I turned to sentencing. In municipal court, people sometimes expect quick punishments and quicker forgetting. I do not practice that kind of judging. I said on the record that sentencing is not revenge and it is not theater. It is the lawful measurement of harm, risk, character, and the chance that a person might choose better if the structure around them is strong enough to matter. I said wealth does not increase guilt by itself, but when wealth is used as a shield against duty, it reveals a part of character the court is entitled to weigh. I listed what I had considered: Elena's physical injury, the destruction of life-sustaining medication, Rosa Ramirez's hospital crisis and permanent kidney damage, the destroyed vehicle, lost wages, the attempt to alter evidence before dawn, the online mockery, the pressure applied to a public school, the effort to silence a victim with money, the defendant's complete lack of remorse in open court. Then I spoke the line people in Bellhaven would be repeating by sunset: Privilege is not a license to leave ordinary people bleeding in the rain. If that belief lives anywhere in you, if you have ever wanted one sentence to stand up for people who get ignored too often, then mark this moment in your own way. A courtroom is only a room unless words inside it still mean something. That afternoon, I needed mine to mean something. At that, Vivian finally broke form. "This is insane," she said. "You can't bury me over this." I told her she would remain silent while sentence was pronounced. Her hands, which had spent the whole day looking decorative and easy, were now clenched hard enough to pale at the knuckles. The gold Rolex flashed once under the courtroom lights and then looked to me like nothing more than metal. I imposed the maximum jail term of 180 days on count 1, leaving the scene of an accident with injury. I imposed 90 days on count 2, reckless operation, and 90 days on count 3, criminal damaging. I imposed 30 days on count 4, unlawful phone use while driving. I ordered count 1 and count 3 to run consecutive, with counts 2 and 4 concurrent, for a total of 270 days in the Belhaven County Jail. I gave credit for no time previously served because there was none. I denied any request to suspend the jail term. The room stayed so quiet I could hear the court recorder humming. I imposed fines totaling $3,250 plus court costs. I suspended Vivian Mercer's operator's license for 5 years beginning that day. I ordered restitution in the amount of $13,948.56 to Elena Ramirez for documented losses tied directly and foreseeably to the offense. That amount covered Elena's urgent care, imaging, and therapy, Rosa's out-of-pocket hospital costs, the destroyed Civic, towing and deductible costs, replacement medication, transit expenses, and lost tutoring wages. I set a separate restitution hearing only if either side challenged the arithmetic within 14 days. Neither ever did. But I was not finished because jail alone would not speak to the shape of the harm. Upon release, I placed Vivian on 3 years of community control. As conditions, I ordered 400 hours of supervised service with the Belhaven Community Health Transport Program and the St. Agnes Insulin Assistance Pantry. She would lift boxes, log medication deliveries, and assist patients waiting on rides they could not afford to miss. I also ordered 120 hours of supervised service at Roosevelt Middle School's after-school science lab under Dr. Lorraine Phelps, with no social media access, no filming, no branding, and no public credit. She would not turn consequence into content. I further ordered completion of a driver accountability course, a digital ethics course, and written letters of apology to Elena Ramirez, Rosa Ramirez, Roosevelt Middle School, and the Belhaven Community Health Transport Program, all subject to probation review for sincerity before delivery. I made plain that probation, not family staff, would monitor compliance. Then I said, Ms. Mercer, you treated duty as something for lesser people. For the next 3 years, duty will be your daily address. I had not written that line in advance. It came exactly then. The room took it in all at once. Vivian rose half out of her chair. "My father will appeal this," she said. Gavin Mercer stood too, face red for the first time all day. "Judge, this is disproportionate." I looked at him and answered, "Sir, your time to influence this matter expired when your daughter drove away." Sergeant Kemp stepped to Vivian's side. Martin Keene placed a hand at his client's elbow and whispered the only wise words he had said in over an hour. "Sit down and let it happen." She sat, but tears of rage had finally reached her eyes. Then came the victim impact statement. Elena had asked whether she still needed to give it now that sentence had already been imposed. I told her no. She said she wanted to speak anyway. She stood at the rail, small beside the dark wood, green raincoat over one arm, wrist brace visible under her sleeve. "I don't want her destroyed," she said. "I want her to understand that other people's lives are not props." I remanded Vivian Mercer into custody immediately. Her Louis Vuitton bag was handed to an officer. Her phone was surrendered. The Rolex came off at booking, not because jewelry matters to me, but because county procedure does not care who your father is. She turned once at the side door as if expecting the world to reverse for her out of habit. It did not. The metal door shut behind her with an ordinary sound. Sometimes the plainest sounds carry the most weight. After the gallery emptied and the reporters drifted into the hallway to file what they had seen, Elena remained near the front bench collecting her papers one sheet at a time. The courtroom felt larger then, as courtrooms always do after hard truth has passed through them. Naomi stacked exhibits. Sergeant Kemp spoke quietly with Dana Shu. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Elena approached when everyone else had the decency to give her room. "Your Honor," she said, "thank you for seeing what this really was." I stepped down one level from the bench, not close enough to cross any line, just close enough to answer her as one woman to another within the limits my office requires. "Ms. Ramirez," I said, "I did not give you dignity today. You brought it in with you." She pressed her lips together, nodded once, and left with the same careful posture she had carried all day. As for Vivian Mercer, she served 270 days less a small statutory credit for jail work detail and came out quieter, thinner, and almost impossible to match to the woman in the Tom Ford suit. Her Instagram account disappeared in May 2026. By probation order, she could not create new public monetized content during community control. The Porsche was sold not by court command, but because restitution had to be paid, and Belhaven County Jail is a poor place from which to enjoy luxury. Her probation officer, Marisol Dean, reported tense compliance at first and steady compliance later. No glamour, no speeches. The first time Vivian reported to the Belhaven Community Health Transport Program after release, she came in plain jeans and a gray sweatshirt with no visible label. She was assigned to inventory insulin coolers, carry supply boxes, and log delivery mileage in blue ink. The program director later wrote that on her second week, she complained that the work was beneath her. An older volunteer named Eddie Baines, a retired bus mechanic with arthritic hands and a voice like gravel, told her, "Good, then maybe you'll finally bend low enough to see people." After that, the complaints slowed. At Roosevelt Middle School, Dr. Phelps kept my conditions exact. No photos, no press, no public credit. Vivian wiped lab counters, sorted donated goggles, packed robotics kits, and once a week sat in the back of Elena Ramirez's after-school science room, taking inventory of wire, batteries, motors, and small screw sets. Elena had not asked for that assignment. I had. Consequence should face the shape of the harm it caused without turning the harmed person into a jailer. Dr. Phelps later told me Elena remained formal, steady, and fair. That sounded exactly right to me. If you want to know why you should never miss the stories judges carry after the verdict, it is because the verdict is only the door. What matters most is what walks through it later. I have one more story after this that taught me silence can lie just as hard as words can. And if you ever hear me tell it,